Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're jumping into one of the most revolutionary periods in all of human history. It was a time when a handful of brilliant thinkers looked at the old world of ideas and basically said, you know what, this just isn't working anymore. Let's build a new one from the ground up.
So that's the big question, right? How do you even begin to rebuild an entire world of ideas? This isn't just about tweaking a few things here and there. Nope, this was a massive, full-scale construction project for the human mind. And like any great construction project, this one had a team. For this explainer, let's get to know them by their jobs. We've got the architect, who designed a whole new blueprint for truth itself. Then there's the engineer, who drafted a new model for society. And of course, the demolition expert, whose job was to tear down all the old, rotten structures standing in the way. So, our architect, our engineer, and our demolition expert. These were real people: René Descartes, John Locke, and Voltaire, three incredible minds at the very heart of the Enlightenment. And their shared goal? It was wildly ambitious, to completely reconstruct all human knowledge and society, not based on old traditions or what some king said, but on a brand new, solid foundation of human reason. Okay, let's start with our architect, René Descartes. This guy was a brilliant mathematician and philosopher who looked at the state of knowledge in his day and saw, well, kind of a mess. He wanted to find one single, absolutely unshakable truth that could be the foundation for everything else.
And his method for finding this truth? Whoa, it was radical. He basically asked himself this exact question: what if everything I think I know is actually wrong? So he decided to systematically doubt it all. Everything his teachers taught him, everything he read in books, all the traditions he'd been raised with. He just wiped the entire slate clean.
And you can really hear the frustration in his own words, right? He's saying his whole education basically just taught him how little he actually knew for sure. But here's the thing. This profound doubt wasn't him giving up. No, this was his motivation. This was his ground zero.
So from that absolute ground zero of doubt, he builds this amazing toolkit for thinking. And what's so cool is how practical these rules are. This is basically the scientific method in a nutshell. But Descartes, he wanted to apply this method to everything: philosophy, morality, even the existence of God.
And so, after doubting his own senses, the physical world, even math, he finally hit bedrock. He realized that even if he was being fooled about literally everything, he had to exist in order to be fooled. The very act of thinking proved his own existence as a thinking thing.
And that right there, cogito ergo sum, that became his foundation stone. It was the one clear, undeniable truth that survived his hurricane of doubt, and from this single point of certainty, our architect could finally start drawing up the blueprints for a whole new world of knowledge.
All right, so the foundation is laid. Now let's bring in our engineer, John Locke. Locke takes this core principle of reason and applies it to the super practical, often very messy, world of politics and government. He wasn't just pondering ideas, he was trying to engineer a better machine for how we all live together.
And the change he proposes is fundamental. The old model was completely top-down. A king gets his power from God, end of story. The people, well, they're just subjects. Locke comes along and just flips that entire pyramid upside down. He argues that real, legitimate power has to flow up from the people, because people are born free and equal citizens. In a world full of absolute monarchs, this was explosive, dangerous stuff.
So how does this work? Through something he calls the social contract. Think of it like a deal. We, as free individuals, voluntarily agree to give up a little bit of our total freedom to create a government. And why on earth would we do that? Simple: to protect our natural rights, our life, our liberty, and our property. The key takeaway? The government works for us, not the other way around.
But this is where Locke gets really radical, the most dangerous part of his whole idea. What happens if the government breaks that contract? What if it starts attacking the very rights it's supposed to protect? For Locke, the answer was crystal clear. The deal is off. The people have the right, maybe even the duty, to dissolve that government and build a new one. Okay, so you've got a new blueprint and an engineering plan. But sometimes, before you can build, you've got to clear the site first. You need some demolition, and for that, enter Voltaire. He was the master of satire, an unbelievably witty and absolutely ferocious writer whose job was to take a sledgehammer to all the hypocrisy, cruelty, and philosophical nonsense of his time.
And Voltaire's masterpiece of demolition, the novel Candide, was actually sparked by a real-life horror, the 1755 Lisbon earthquake. This terrible catastrophe just made a complete mockery of this popular philosophical idea at the time that all is for the best in the best of all possible worlds. Voltaire looked at this immense, random suffering and saw a senseless tragedy, not some part of a perfect divine plan.
And this is how he works. He uses his wit like a weapon. He mercilessly satirizes the Portuguese Inquisition, which responded to the earthquake by burning heretics, somehow believing this would please God. Voltaire just points out how completely lethally ridiculous this is. But look, Voltaire wasn't just cracking jokes. This next quote from Candide, it's just devastating. A mutilated slave in Suriname explains his horrific condition, and in one sentence, the comfortable, sweet lives of Europeans are directly tied to brutal, inhuman suffering. He demolishes the ignorance that allows that kind of cruelty to just exist in the background.
So, okay, after tearing down all this phony optimism, after exposing all this brutal hypocrisy, Voltaire leaves his characters, and all of us, with a huge question. If all the grand, fancy philosophical systems are useless, what now? What are we actually supposed to do?
And his answer is so famous and so, well, so simple and beautiful. We must cultivate our garden. Now, this isn't about giving up. It's about the exact opposite. It's about ditching the useless, abstract theories and instead focusing on practical, hands-on work to make your own little corner of the world better. It's a call to concrete action, not endless debate.
Okay, so let's bring the whole crew back together. You've got the architect, the engineer, and the demolition expert. 3 very different thinkers with 3 very different skill sets, but all working on the same revolutionary project, rebuilding our world on a new foundation of reason.
So let's just lay it all out one more time. You've got Descartes, our architect, giving us that new foundation for truth with I think, therefore I am. You have Locke, our engineer, designing the blueprint for a free society based on natural rights. And then you have Voltaire, our demolition expert, clearing the ground by taking down cruelty and reminding us that all this thinking has to lead to real, practical action.
And here's maybe the most important thing to remember about all of this. Their work, it isn't some dusty thing in a museum. The Enlightenment isn't over. They started a project, and they basically left us the blueprints and the tools and said, okay, your turn.
And that really brings us to a final question for you to think about. Looking at the world we live in right now, which part of this toolkit do you think we need most? Do we need more of Descartes' deep, radical search for what's fundamentally true? More of Locke's careful engineering of just and fair societies? Or more of Voltaire's sharp, fearless demolition of hypocrisy and nonsense? There's no single right answer, but it's definitely something to think about.